In the quiet village of Stargrove, a brilliant astronomer lies dead in a locked observatory, poisoned by cyanide, an antique astrolabe shattered beside him. Enter Hercule Poirot, whose little gray cells unravel a web of ambition, betrayal, and hidden secrets. Was it the jealous colleague, the eager student, or the devoted curator who stole Dr. Thorne's cosmic discovery? In a race against deception, Poirot reveals a motive as timeless as the stars. Dive into the broken astrolabe, a mystery where every clue shines with danger. Chapter 1. The Locked Observatory. The autumn wind carried a sharp chill through the cobbled lanes of Stargrove, a sleepy English village nestled beneath the rolling hills of Kent. Hercule Poirot, his silver-topped cane tapping lightly on the stones, paused to adjust the brim of his Homburg hat, ensuring it sat at precisely the right angle. His gray suit, immaculate despite the journey from London, gleamed faintly in the fading light of the September evening. The village was quaint, its thatched cottages and ivy-clad walls exuding an air of timeless serenity. Yet Poirot's keen eyes detected an undercurrent of unease. The summons from Inspector Japp had been urgent, and Poirot, ever intrigued by the peculiarities of human nature, had arrived promptly. At the crest of a gentle hill stood the Stargrove Observatory, its white dome catching the last rays of the setting sun like a beacon. Inspector Japp waited at the iron gates, his overcoat flapping in the breeze, his ruddy face creased with impatience. "Poirot, you're a sight for sore eyes," he called, striding forward. "This one's a proper mystery, I'll tell you that." Dr. Elias Thorne, astronomer of some repute, found dead inside his observatory. Door locked, no sign of forced entry, and, here's the kicker, a blasted antique astrolabe smashed to bits beside him. It's got my men stumped. Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his piqued curiosity. A locked room, mon ami, and a broken instrument of the stars? This is most intriguing. Lead on, Inspector. They ascended the stone path to the observatory, its silhouette stark against the deepening twilight. The building was a marvel of Victorian design, its dome crafted to slide open for celestial observations, its walls adorned with plaques commemorating astronomical achievements. Inside, the air was cool and faintly metallic, redolent of polished brass and old leather. The main chamber was dominated by a massive telescope, its lens glinting like a giant's eye. At a mahogany desk in the corner, Dr. Elias Thorne lay slumped, his head resting on a scattering of papers, his face frozen in a rictus of pain. A glass of ruby-red port stood untouched beside him, its surface catching the glow of a single desk lamp. Nearby, on the polished floor, lay the wreckage of an astrolabe, an intricate device of concentric rings and gears, now shattered, its fragments glinting like fallen stars. Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, swept the scene. He noted the heavy oak door, its lock unblemished, and the single key protruding from Thorne's waistcoat pocket. The windows, high and narrow, were sealed, their latches rusted from disuse. The room bore no signs of struggle, save for the ruined astrolabe. Kneeling carefully, Poirot examined the fragments, his gloved fingers hovering over the twisted brass. "This astrolabe," he murmured, "it is not merely broken. It has been destroyed with purpose. But why?" Japp shifted uncomfortably, his boots creaking on the floor. "That's what I'd like to know." Thorne was alone last night, locked in here by all accounts. His assistant found him this morning, raised the alarm. No one could have got in or out, Poirot. It's impossible, Poirot rose, dusting his gloves with a silk handkerchief. Impossible, Inspector? Non, non. The impossible is merely a challenge to the little gray cells. Tell me, who are the players in this celestial drama? Japp gestured toward a notebook. We've got 3 with ties to Thorne. Dr. Margaret Henshaw, his colleague at the Royal Astronomical Society. Word is they didn't see eye to eye. Then there's Roger Blake, a student of Thorne's. Bit of an eager lad, always hanging about. And Miss Clara Dunham, curator of the observatory's museum, knows every gadget in the place like the back of her hand. They're all waiting in the village hall, ready for questioning. Poirot nodded, his gaze returning to the desk. A few papers were scattered, but none seemed significant. A star chart, a letter from a colleague, a schedule of observations. Yet something felt amiss, as if the desk had been disturbed, its contents not quite as Thorne might have left them. He leaned closer to the glass of port, inhaling delicately. A faint, bitter scent lingered, almost imperceptible. "This glass," he said. "It holds more than port, I think." Japp frowned. "You think he was poisoned? We're waiting on the coroner, but—" "Patience, mon ami," Poirot interrupted, his voice soft but firm. "The truth, it reveals itself in time. The locked room, the broken astrolabe, the glass of port, these are but pieces of a puzzle. And Hercule Poirot, he will arrange them perfectly." As they left the observatory, the stars began to pierce the velvet sky, indifferent to the tragedy below. Poirot paused, glancing upward. "The heavens," he said softly, "they hold many secrets. But so, too, do the hearts of men." Chapter 2. The 3 suspects, the village hall of Stargrove, a modest building with ivy-clad walls and a sagging roof, stood at the heart of the village, its windows glowing warmly against the encroaching dusk. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old wood and wax polish, and a low murmur of voices filled the space as Hercule Poirot entered, his polished shoes clicking precisely on the oak floorboards. Inspector Japp followed, his notebook clutched tightly, his expression one of dogged determination tempered by the faintest trace of exasperation. The hall, usually reserved for parish meetings and amateur theatricals, had been transformed into a makeshift interrogation room, its long table surrounded by 3 figures whose postures betrayed varying degrees of unease. Poirot paused at the threshold, his sharp green eyes scanning the trio with the intensity of a jeweler examining a flawed gem. Each suspect, he knew, held a piece of the puzzle that was Dr. Elias Thorne's death, and it was his task, nay, his art, to discern how those pieces fit together. The broken astrolabe, the locked observatory, the glass of port with its faint, bitter undertone, these were the notes of a symphony, and Poirot was determined to conduct it to its resolution. "Mes amis," he began, his voice soft yet commanding, "we are gathered to unravel a tragedy. Dr. Thorne, a man of the stars, lies dead, and the circumstances, they are most curious. I, Hercule Poirot, will ask questions, and I ask that you answer with the truth. For the truth, it cannot hide from the little gray cells." Japp cleared his throat, gesturing to the 3 seated figures. "Right then. Let me introduce you. First, Dr. Margaret Henshaw, colleague of the deceased at the Royal Astronomical Society. Next, Mr. Roger Blake, Dr. Thorne's student. And finally, Miss Clara Dunham, curator of the observatory's museum. Each was in or around the observatory yesterday evening, and each has a story to tell." Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching slightly, as he studied the suspects. Dr. Margaret Henshaw sat rigidly, her hands folded in her lap, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun that accentuated the sharp angles of her face. Her gray eyes met Poirot's with a flicker of defiance, but her fingers, twisting a silver ring, betrayed a nervous energy. Roger Blake, by contrast, was all youthful agitation, his sandy hair disheveled, his blue eyes darting from Poirot to the table to the broken astrolabe, which had been brought from the observatory and now rested in a wooden box at the table's center. Miss Clara Dunham, the curator, sat with quiet composure, her hands resting calmly on a leather-bound notebook, her dark eyes steady, but shadowed with something Poirot could not yet name. Grief, perhaps, or caution. "Let us begin," Poirot said, seating himself opposite the trio, his small, neat frame somehow commanding the room. "Dr. Henshaw, you knew Dr. Thorne well, n'est-ce pas? Tell me of your relationship with him." Dr. Henshaw's lips tightened, and she adjusted her posture as if bracing for an assault. "We were colleagues," she said, her voice crisp and precise, with the faintest trace of a northern accent. "Elias, Dr. Thorne, was a brilliant astronomer, though not without flaws. We collaborated on several papers, but our methods differed. He was secretive, prone to working alone. It caused friction, at times friction?" Poirot's eyebrows rose delicately. "Of what nature, this friction?" She hesitated, her ring twisting intensifying. "Professional disagreements. Elias had a habit of claiming credit for shared work. His latest project, for instance, he hinted at a discovery, something significant, but refused to share details, even with me. It was frustrating, to say the least." Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. "And where were you, Dr. Henshaw, last evening, when Dr. Thorne met his end?" "I was at the university in Canterbury, delivering a lecture on galactic clusters," she replied, her tone firm. "It began at 6 and ended at 7:30. I returned to Stargrove by train, arriving around 9. I went straight to my lodgings at the Rose and Crown." Poirot made a mental note of the timeline, his fingers brushing the edge of his mustache. "A lecture, you say? And there are those who can confirm this?" "Of course," she snapped, then softened slightly. "My colleagues, Professor Langley and Dr. Merton, were in attendance. They can vouch for me." "Very good," Poirot said, turning his attention to the young man beside her. "Monsieur Blake, you are Dr. Thorne's student, oui? A young man eager to learn the secrets of the cosmos. Tell me, what brought you to the observatory yesterday?" Roger Blake swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. His hands resting on the table trembled slightly, and he seemed to shrink under Poirot's gaze. I was working on my thesis," he stammered. "Dr. Thorne was my supervisor. He let me use the observatory's library sometimes, even after hours. I was there in the afternoon looking through his star charts. I left around 7 before he locked up for the night." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you saw nothing unusual? No visitors? No disturbances?" Roger shook his head, his gaze flickering to the astrolabe. "No, sir." "Well, the astrolabe was on his desk when I left. It was fine, not broken. I swear it." The sincerity in his voice was palpable, but Poirot noted the way his eyes lingered on the shattered instrument, as if it held some unspoken significance. "This astrolabe," Poirot said, gesturing to the box. "It interests you, no?" "Why is that?" Roger flushed, his freckled cheeks reddening. It's an antique, isn't it?" Dr. Thorne was always fiddling with it, like it was more than just a decoration. I don't know why it's broken. Honest Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Very well, Monsieur Blake. And after you left the observatory, where did you go? To my lodgings, Roger said quickly. I was reading until late. My landlady, Mrs. Carter, can tell you I didn't go out again. Poirot's gaze shifted to the final suspect. Mademoiselle Dunham, you are the guardian of the observatory's treasures, are you not? The astrolabe, it was under your care? Clara. Dunham nodded, her expression composed, but her eyes betraying a quiet intensity. Her dark hair was neatly pinned, and her simple gray dress spoke of practicality, though a small silver brooch in the shape of a crescent moon added a touch of elegance. Yes, Mr. Poirot, she said, her voice low and steady. The astrolabe was part of our collection, a 17th-century piece, exquisitely crafted. Dr. Thorne borrowed it for his desk, though I warned him to handle it carefully. I was cataloging other artifacts in the museum wing until 7:45 last evening. After that, I returned to my cottage. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And this astrolabe, it was intact when you last saw it? Yes, she said firmly. I checked on it at 6 when I brought Dr. Thorne some documents. It was in perfect condition. Poirot leaned forward, his voice softening. You cared for Dr. Thorne, perhaps? He was more than a colleague. Clara's composure faltered for a moment, her fingers tightening on her notebook. He was a friend, she said quietly. A brilliant man, if sometimes thoughtless with the artifacts. His death is a great loss. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging every gesture, every inflection. The room fell silent, save for the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. Japp shifted impatiently, but Poirot raised a hand to forestall him. One moment, Inspector. I wish to examine this astrolabe more closely. He approached the wooden box, his gloved hands hovering over the fragments. The astrolabe, even in ruin, was a thing of beauty. Its brass rings etched with celestial markings, its gears once capable of charting the heavens. Poirot's fingers traced the air above a particularly jagged break, noting the force required to shatter such a sturdy instrument. This was no accident, he murmured. The destruction, it is deliberate, a message, perhaps, or a diversion. Japp frowned. A diversion from what, Poirot? The man was poisoned, or so you think. The astrolabe's just a side note. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Non, mon ami. In a crime, nothing is merely a side note. The astrolabe, it speaks to us. We must listen. He turned back to the suspects, his gaze sweeping over them like a searchlight. Each of you had access to the observatory. Each of you had reason to be near Dr. Thorne. But only one, I think, had reason to end his life. I will discover that reason, and the truth, it will not elude Hercule Poirot. Dr. Henshaw's eyes flashed with indignation. This is absurd. I had no reason to harm Elias. Our disagreements were academic, nothing more. Roger's voice was almost a whisper. I admired Dr. Thorne. He was my mentor. I'd never... Clara cut in, her tone measured but firm. Mr. Poirot, I respected Dr. Thorne's work. His death benefits no one. Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. Enough, mes amis. Words are but the surface of the truth. The little gray cells, they delve deeper. Inspector, I would speak with each alone. Tomorrow, after I have reflected. For now, I bid you good evening. As the suspects filed out, Poirot lingered by the astrolabe, his mind a whirl of possibilities. Dr. Henshaw's ambition, Roger's nervousness, Clara's quiet sorrow. Each was a thread in a tapestry yet to be woven. He stepped outside, the night air crisp and clear, the stars above Stargrove blazing with silent indifference. "The heavens," he murmured, "they see all, but they do not speak. It is for Poirot to give them voice." Back at the Rose and Crown, where he had taken a room, Poirot sat by a crackling fire, a tisane steaming in his hand. He opened his notebook, its pages pristine, and began to jot down observations. Dr. Henshaw's lecture, Roger's late-night studies, Clara's cataloging. Each alibi was plausible, yet none was ironclad. The astrolabe, he wrote, was not merely a victim of the crime, but a clue to its heart. Its destruction suggested knowledge of its significance, perhaps even its secrets. And the poison, cyanide, he suspected, from the faint, almond-like scent, required both opportunity and expertise. He closed the notebook, his eyes drifting to the window, where the constellation Orion gleamed. "The stars," he said softly, "they are eternal. But men, they are fleeting, and their passions, they burn bright and brief. Tomorrow, Hercule Poirot will shine a light on those passions." Chapter 3. The Astronomer's Legacy. The morning sun cast a golden haze over Stargrove, its light filtering through the mullioned windows of the Rose and Crown, where Hercule Poirot sat in a cushioned armchair, a delicate porcelain cup of tisane cradled in his hands. The inn, with its low beams and crackling hearth, exuded a rustic charm that contrasted sharply with the precision of Poirot's attire, his pinstriped suit immaculate, his mustache waxed to symmetrical perfection. The events of the previous evening, the grim tableau of Dr. Elias Thorne's body slumped in the Locked Observatory, the shattered astrolabe, and the guarded demeanors of the three suspects had set his little gray cells alight. Now, as the village stirred awake, Poirot prepared to delve deeper into the enigma of Thorne's death, seeking the thread that would unravel the tapestry of motive and opportunity. Inspector Japp, ever punctual despite his grumbling disposition, arrived at the inn promptly at 9, his overcoat slightly askew from the brisk walk up the hill. "Morning, Poirot," he said, settling into a chair opposite. "I've got the coroner's preliminary notes, and I've spoken to the locals. Thorne was a bit of a loner, but respected. No enemies to speak of, save perhaps Dr. Henshaw's professional spats. What's your next move?" Poirot sipped his tisane, his eyes gleaming with quiet intensity. "Mon ami, to understand the crime, we must understand the man. Dr. Thorne was not merely an astronomer. He was a seeker of truths hidden in the stars. His legacy, his work, his discovery, holds the key to his death. I wish to learn more of his life, his habits, and those who shared his orbit. Let us begin at the inn. For the walls of such places, they hear much." The innkeeper, a stout woman named Mrs. Agnes Pritchard, bustled over with a tray of scones and tea for Japp, her round face flushed with the morning's exertions. Poirot, with his characteristic charm, drew her into conversation, his questions as gentle as they were incisive. "Madame Pritchard, you knew Dr. Thorne, oui? A man of such brilliance must have been a familiar figure in Stargrove." Mrs. Pritchard nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oh, aye, Mr. Poirot. Dr. Thorne was a regular, though not one for idle chatter. He'd come in for a pint or a glass of port, always with a notebook, scribbling away. Lately, he was excited, said he'd found something big, a new star or some such. Kept it close, though. Didn't trust many with his secrets." Poirot's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Excited, you say?" And did he speak of this discovery with others? Dr. Henshaw, perhaps, or young Monsieur Blake? The innkeeper frowned, her brow furrowing as she recalled. Dr. Henshaw was here a few nights back, and I overheard her arguing with Dr. Thorne in the snug. She was proper cross, saying he'd stolen her ideas, that he'd regret keeping her in the dark. Mind you, she left in a huff, and he just sat there, calm as you like, sipping his port. And Monsieur Blake? Poirot pressed, his voice smooth as silk. Roger? Oh, he's a nervous lad, always trailing after Dr. Thorne like a puppy. I saw him hanging about the observatory late one evening last week, long after dark. Said he was fetching books, but he looked shifty, if you ask me. Poirot exchanged a glance with Japp, who jotted a note in his ever-present book. And Mademoiselle Dunham, the curator? Did she frequent your establishment? Mrs. Pritchard's expression softened. Clara's a dear soul, always polite. She'd come in now and then, usually with Dr. Thorne, discussing those old instruments of hers. She was here the day before he died, looking worried. Said something about the astrolabe being mishandled. I reckon she took her job to heart. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing each detail like a jeweler sorting gems. Merci, Madame Pritchard. You have been most illuminating. One final question. Did Dr. Thorne have visitors, strangers perhaps, in the days before his death? The innkeeper shook her head. None that I saw, sir. Stargrove's a quiet place. Everyone knows everyone's business. As Mrs. Pritchard returned to her duties, Poirot turned to Japp. The discovery, Inspector. It is the heart of this matter. A new celestial body, perhaps, or a calculation of great import. We must see Dr. Thorne's papers, his sanctuary. Let us return to the observatory. The walk to the observatory was brisk, the morning air sharp with the scent of damp leaves. The domed building loomed ahead, its white stone serene, yet somehow foreboding. Inside, the scene remained as Poirot had left it. Thorne's body had been removed, but the desk, the glass of port, and the broken astrolabe remained under police guard. Poirot approached the desk, his eyes scanning the scattered papers with meticulous care. Star charts, logarithmic tables, and a half-finished letter to a colleague in Oxford were present, but nothing suggested the monumental discovery Mrs. Pritchard had described. The desk's drawers, however, bore faint scratches, as if someone had pried them open in haste. Someone searched this desk, Poirot murmured, his gloved finger tracing the marks. Not Dr. Thorne, for his touch was precise. No, this was the work of another, seeking his secrets. Japp rubbed his chin. You think the killer took his notes? But why smash the astrolabe? It's not like it held papers. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The astrolabe, mon ami, is more than it seems. Its destruction was not random. But for now, let us focus on the man. What do we know of his life? Japp consulted his notes. Elias Thorne, aged 52, widower, no children, lived alone in a cottage near the observatory. Brilliant but solitary, as Mrs. Pritchard said. Published extensively on stellar spectroscopy, won awards but kept to himself. Colleagues respected him, though some, like Henshaw, thought him arrogant. No debts, no scandals, clean as a whistle, save for this discovery business. Poirot nodded, his gaze drifting to the telescope, its lens still pointed at the heavens. A man of solitude, yet his work drew others to him. Dr. Henshaw with her ambition, Monsieur Blake with his eagerness, Mademoiselle Dunham with her devotion to the past. Each had a stake in his world, but which sought to end it. Leaving the observatory, Poirot and Japp visited Thorne's cottage, a modest stone dwelling with a view of the hills. The interior was Spartan, its shelves lined with astronomical texts and journals. A small study held a second desk, this one cluttered with more papers, drafts of articles, calculations, and a curious sketch of the astrolabe, annotated with measurements. Poirot's eyes lingered on the sketch, noting a reference to a hidden mechanism. "This astrolabe," he said, "it was no mere ornament. It held something of value, perhaps the key to Thorne's discovery. A search of the cottage revealed little else, no missing notes, no signs of intrusion. Yet Poirot's instincts prickled. The absence of evidence, Inspector, is itself evidence. The killer knew what to take. Their next stop was the village post office, where Poirot inquired about Thorne's correspondence. The postmistress, a sharp-eyed woman named Miss Emily Tate, confirmed that Thorne had posted a package to London 2 days before his death, addressed to the Royal Astronomical Society. It was a small parcel, she said, sealed tight. He was particular about it, paid for express delivery. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A parcel, you say? This is most interesting. We must contact the Society at once." Back at the Rose and Crown, Poirot sat by the fire, his notebook open, his pen moving with deliberate precision. He sketched a timeline. Thorne's excitement over his discovery, Henshaw's argument, Blake's late-night visits, Dunham's concern for the astrolabe. The parcel to London suggested Thorne had safeguarded his work, but its contents were unknown. The astrolabe's destruction, he wrote, was a calculated act, not of rage, but of necessity. The poison, still unconfirmed but likely cyanide, pointed to a murderer with both opportunity and knowledge. Japp, nursing a pint, interrupted Poirot's reverie. "I've sent a telegram to the Society about that parcel. Should hear back by tomorrow. But what's your angle, Poirot? You keep circling back to that astrolabe." Poirot closed his notebook, his expression serene yet resolute. "The astrolabe, mon ami, is the silent witness. Its destruction was meant to conceal, but it reveals. Someone knew its secret, and that someone sought to claim Thorne's legacy. Tomorrow, we speak again with our suspects. The truth, it hides in their words, their glances, their fears." As night fell, Poirot stepped outside, the stars blazing above Stargrove. Orion's belt shone brightly, a reminder of Thorne's quest to chart the heavens. "The legacy of a man," Poirot murmured, "is not in the stars he finds, but in the hearts he touches. And one heart, it burned with envy enough to kill." Chapter 4. The Poisoned Glass. The morning mist clung to the hills of Stargrove, veiling the observatory's dome in a ghostly shroud as Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp made their way up the winding path. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and pine, and Poirot, ever immaculate in his charcoal overcoat and polished shoes, adjusted his scarf with a fastidious flick. His mind, however, was far from the chill. It churned with the details of Dr. Elias Thorne's death, the locked observatory, the shattered astrolabe, and the glass of port that had whispered its bitter secret to his discerning nose. Today, the coroner's report would arrive, and Poirot anticipated it would confirm his suspicion. Poison, swift and merciless, had claimed the astronomer's life. Inside the Rose and Crown, where they had repaired for breakfast, the inn's dining room was a haven of warmth, its hearth crackling and its tables adorned with crisp linen. Poirot sipped a tisane, his green eyes fixed on a point beyond the window, where the village stirred under the weight of its tragedy. Japp, less inclined to reverie, tackled a plate of bacon and eggs with gusto, his notebook open beside him. "The coroner's report should be here by noon," he said between bites. "If you're right about poison, Poirot, it'll narrow things down. But that locked room, I still can't wrap my head around it. Door bolted, key in Thorne's pocket, windows sealed. It's a proper conundrum." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his amusement. "A conundrum, mon ami? No, it is a canvas, and the brushstrokes of the murderer are there for us to see. The poison, the astrolabe, the locked door, these are not separate mysteries but parts of a single design. We must study the artist behind them." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a young constable, his face flushed from the cold. He handed Japp a sealed envelope, saluting briskly before retreating. Japp tore it open, scanning the contents with a deepening frown. "Well, you're spot on, Poirot. Cyanide," says the coroner. "Found in Thorne's stomach, likely ingested through the port. Death was quick, within minutes. The glass had traces of it, but the bottle's clean as a whistle. Someone slipped it into his drink, no question." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "Cyanide. It is a choice both bold and precise. It requires knowledge, access, and nerve. The glass, Inspector. Tell me more of it." Japp consulted the report. "Standard wine glass found on Thorne's desk. Only his fingerprints on it, which is odd, don't you think? If someone poisoned it, you'd expect their prints too, unless they wore gloves or wiped it clean. Or," Poirot said softly, "they never touched the glass at all. The poison could have been introduced by other means, a syringe, perhaps, or a sleight of hand. Let us visit the observatory again. The scene, it speaks when we listen." The observatory, bathed in the pale light of morning, seemed less a place of science and more a stage for tragedy. The constable guarding the door stepped aside, and Poirot entered, his eyes immediately drawn to the desk where Thorne had met his end. The glass of port remained, its contents now removed for analysis, but its position, slightly askew, as if set down in haste, caught Poirot's attention. He leaned closer, noting a faint ring of condensation on the desk, suggesting the glass had been moved after Thorne's death. "The glass," he murmured. "It tells a story. The poison was added not long before he drank, for cyanide is volatile. The murderer was here or near at the moment of the crime." Japp scratched his head. "But how, Poirot?" The door was locked from the inside, key in Thorne's pocket. No one could have got in without him knowing Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The locked room, it is a trick of the mind. We assume it is impregnable, but assumptions, they are the enemy of truth. Let us examine the kitchen, where such poisons might be found. The observatory's small kitchen, tucked behind the main chamber, was a utilitarian space with a sink, a kettle, and a cupboard of supplies. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the shelves, landing on a small, unmarked vial tucked behind a tin of cleaning powder. He donned gloves and lifted it carefully, holding it to the light. The vial was half empty, its contents a clear liquid that emitted a faint, almond-like odor. "Cyanide," he said, "or a compound of it." Accessible to anyone who knew where to look, Japp's eyes widened. "Blimey, Poirot. You think the killer just waltzed in here, grabbed this, and dosed the port?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, replacing the vial. "But the question is not only how, but why. The poison, it is swift, but the astrolabe's destruction, it is deliberate, theatrical. It suggests a mind that wishes to mislead, to distract from the true motive. They returned to the main chamber, where Poirot knelt beside the box containing the astrolabe's fragments. The brass rings, once aligned to map the heavens, were twisted and shattered, but Poirot's fingers traced a pattern in the wreckage, a central disc, slightly thicker than the rest, with a faint seam. "This disc," he said, "it is not merely decorative. It may conceal something, a compartment, perhaps, for Thorne's secrets." Japp frowned. "You think he hid his discovery in there? And the killer smashed it to get it?" Poirot rose, dusting his gloves. "It is possible. But the smashing, it is too violent, too obvious. A clever murderer would open it delicately, non? This destruction, it is a performance, meant to draw our eyes from the truth." Leaving the observatory, Poirot and Japp walked to the village hall, where the suspects had been summoned for further questioning. Dr. Margaret Henshaw arrived first, her posture rigid, her gray eyes wary. Poirot greeted her with a courteous bow, his tone deceptively mild. "Dr. Henshaw, you are a woman of science, oui? You know of poisons, perhaps, from your studies?" Her lips thinned. "I'm an astronomer, Mr. Poirot, not a chemist. But yes, I've studied basic toxicology, as have many in my field. Cyanide is common enough in laboratories, used in certain experiments. Are you suggesting I poisoned Elias?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "I suggest nothing, madam. I merely observe. Your lecture, it ended at 7:30, you said. Yet the train to Stargrove, it arrives at 9. Where were you in those hours?" Henshaw's fingers tightened on her purse. "I stayed at the university, discussing my lecture with colleagues. I caught the 8 o'clock train. You can ask Professor Langley. He saw me off." Poirot nodded, filing the information away. "And the astrolabe, did Dr. Thorne ever speak of its significance?" She hesitated, her gaze flickering. "He was fond of it, said it inspired him. I thought it a sentimental quirk, nothing more." Next came Roger Blake, his youthful face pale and drawn, his hands fidgeting as he sat. Poirot's questions were gentle but relentless. "Monsieur Blake, you were in the observatory that afternoon, oui? You saw the glass of port, perhaps?" Roger swallowed hard. I saw it on his desk, yes. He always kept a bottle in the cupboard. I didn't touch it, I swear. And the astrolabe?" Poirot pressed. "You said it was intact. Did Dr. Thorne handle it in your presence?" Roger nodded, his eyes darting to the box of fragments. "He was polishing it, like it was precious. He didn't let me touch it, said it was delicate. I left before he locked up. I promise." Poirot's gaze softened, sensing the boy's fear. "You admired him, non? His discovery, it excited you?" "Yes," Roger admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "He said it would change everything. I wanted to be part of it." Finally, Clara Dunham entered, her composure as steady as ever, though her dark eyes held a quiet sorrow. Poirot studied her, noting the strength in her hands, calloused from years of handling artifacts. "Mademoiselle Dunham, the astrolabe was your charge. Did you ever suspect it held more than historical value?" Clara's brow furrowed. "It was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, Mr. Poirot, but I never thought it more than that. Elias, Dr. Thorne, treated it with reverence, but he never hinted at a hidden purpose." "And the poison?" Poirot asked, his voice soft. "You have access to the observatory's supplies. Did you know of the cyanide?" Her eyes widened, but she answered calmly. "I knew we had cleaning chemicals, but not specifics. I'm a curator, not a scientist. I had no reason to touch such things." Poirot leaned back, his mind a whirl of connections. The cyanide, accessible to all, pointed to opportunity. The astrolabe's destruction suggested motive, the locked room, a challenge to his intellect. "Merci," he said, dismissing her. "You have all been most helpful." As the suspects departed, Japp turned to Poirot, his frustration evident. "We're no closer, Poirot. They all had access, they all had reasons, but that locked room, it's impossible." Poirot's smile was serene. "Impossible, Inspector?" "Non. The impossible is merely the improbable in disguise. The poison was placed, the astrolabe broken, the door locked, all by a hand that knew its craft. Tomorrow, we learn more of Thorne's parcel to London. It may hold the secret we seek." That evening, Poirot sat by the inn's fire, his notebook filled with precise annotations. The cyanide required knowledge. Henshaw's expertise made her a candidate, but Roger's access and Clara's familiarity with the observatory could not be dismissed. The astrolabe's hidden compartment, if it existed, suggested Thorne had guarded his discovery jealously. And the locked room, Poirot's mind lingered on the lock, its mechanism simple yet susceptible to manipulation. "The truth," he murmured, "it hides in the details. And Hercule Poirot, he will find it." Outside, the stars gleamed over Stargrove, their light untouched by the darkness below. Poirot gazed at them, his thoughts as clear and sharp as the heavens. "The poisoned glass," he whispered, "it is but the beginning. The heart of this crime lies in what was taken and what was left behind." Chapter 5. The colleague's ambition. The afternoon sun hung low over Stargrove, casting long shadows across the village green as Hercule Poirot stepped out of the Rose and Crown, his silver-topped cane tapping a steady rhythm on the cobblestones. The air was crisp, scented with wood smoke and the faint tang of autumn leaves. But Poirot's mind was far from the pastoral charm of the village. The death of Dr. Elias Thorne, the poisoned glass, the shattered astrolabe, and the locked observatory formed a constellation of clues, each pointing to a truth that shimmered just beyond his grasp. Today, he resolved to shine a light on Dr. Margaret Henshaw, whose sharp intellect and sharper ambition made her a figure of particular interest in this celestial drama. Inspector Japp, trudging beside him, clutched a fresh sheaf of papers from the local police station. "Got a reply from the Royal Astronomical Society about that parcel Thorne sent," he said, his breath visible in the cool air. "It arrived in London. All right, but it's just a bundle of star charts and equations. Nothing earth-shattering, they say. Doesn't sound like the big discovery everyone's talking about." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. "Mon ami, what is not found is often as revealing as what is. Dr. Thorne was a cautious man. If his discovery was truly significant, he would not entrust it to a parcel so easily opened. No, the true secret lies elsewhere, perhaps in the astrolabe itself, or in the mind of his killer." Their destination was the village hall, where Dr. Henshaw had agreed to meet for a private interview. Poirot had insisted on speaking with her alone, believing her guarded demeanor would yield more under his singular scrutiny. The hall, with its worn oak beams and faded portraits of local dignitaries, was quiet, save for the soft creak of the floorboards, as Poirot arranged 2 chairs at the long table. He placed a small notebook before him, its pages pristine, and adjusted his cuffs with meticulous care, preparing for the delicate dance of interrogation. Dr. Henshaw entered promptly, her auburn hair pulled back in its usual severe bun, her gray eyes wary but resolute. She wore a tailored navy coat, its severity softened by a silk scarf, and her posture was that of a woman accustomed to command. Yet Poirot noted the slight tremor in her hands as she sat, a telltale sign of nerves beneath her polished exterior. "Dr. Henshaw," Poirot began, his voice smooth and courteous, "I thank you for your time. You are a woman of science, a seeker of truth, oui? Yet in this matter of Dr. Thorne's death, the truth, it remains elusive. I wish to understand your relationship with him, your ambitions, and your actions on the night he died." Henshaw's lips tightened, but she met his gaze steadily. "I've told you, Mr. Poirot, Elias and I were colleagues. We shared a passion for astronomy, but our approaches differed. He was secretive, hoarding his findings, while I believe in collaboration. His death is a tragedy, but I had no part in it." Poirot leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "Collaboration, you say? Yet Madame Pritchard at the inn overheard you arguing with Dr. Thorne, accusing him of stealing your ideas. This suggests a rivalry, perhaps one that burned brightly enough to consume Henshaw's cheeks flushed, but her voice remained controlled. Yes, we argued. Elias was about to publish a discovery, a new celestial body, he claimed. He hinted at it during our last meeting, but refused to share his data. I'd been working on similar calculations for months. It felt like he was sidelining me, taking credit for work we'd both pursued. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this discovery, it was significant enough to elevate the one who claimed it. No? To bring fame, perhaps, or recognition. She hesitated, her fingers twisting the silver ring on her left hand. It could have been monumental, a new star, a new understanding of the cosmos. It would have secured his legacy, and mine, if we'd shared it. But Elias was selfish. He wanted the glory for himself. Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. "And your knowledge of chemistry, Dr. Henshaw, it extends to poisons, does it not? Cyanide, for instance, is familiar to those in your field." Her eyes flashed with indignation. "I told you, I'm an astronomer, not a chemist. Yes, I've handled cyanide in laboratory settings. Many of us have. It's used in spectroscopy, among other things. But to suggest I'd use it to kill Elias is absurd." "Absurd?" Poirot's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Yet the cyanide was found in the observatory's kitchen, accessible to all who knew its secrets. And your lecture, it ended at 7:30, leaving time to return to Stargrove before Dr. Thorne's death. Tell me, madame, what did you do in those hours?" Henshaw's composure wavered, her hands clenching briefly. "I stayed at the university, as I said, discussing my lecture with colleagues. Professor Langley and Dr. Merton were with me until I caught the 8 o'clock train. I arrived in Stargrove at 9 and went to my lodgings. I was nowhere near the observatory. Poirot made a note in his book, his pen moving with deliberate precision. And the astrolabe. Did Dr. Thorne ever speak of its purpose beyond decoration?" She shook her head, her expression guarded. "He was fond of it, said it inspired his calculations. I thought it a quaint affectation, nothing more." Poirot rose, pacing slowly around the table, his cane tapping softly. "Quaint, you say, yet it was destroyed with such violence, as if to conceal a secret. You are a woman of detail, Dr. Henshaw. Did you never notice anything unusual about it?" Her gaze followed him, wary but curious. "No, it was an antique, valuable in its craftsmanship, but I saw no hidden mechanisms, if that's what you mean." Poirot paused, his eyes locking with hers. "Merci, Dr. Henshaw. you have been most forthcoming. But the heart, it speaks louder than words, and I sense there is more you have not said. For now, you may go." As she left, her steps brisk but unsteady, Poirot turned to Japp, who had been listening from the corner. "She is clever, Inspector, but her ambition, it is a fire that burns too brightly. She knows more than she admits, perhaps about the astrolabe, perhaps about the poison." Japp rubbed his chin. "You think she's our killer? She's got the brains for it, and the motive if Thorne was stealing her thunder. But that locked room, Poirot, it's still a puzzle." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The locked room, it is a distraction. Let us visit Dr. Henshaw's lodgings at the Rose and Crown. The surroundings of a person, they reveal much." The Rose and Crown's upper floor housed a series of modest rooms, and Dr. Henshaw's was a study in order, books neatly stacked, papers organized, a small telescope by the window. Yet Poirot's sharp eyes caught a discrepancy. A single drawer in the writing desk, slightly ajar, revealed a scrap of paper tucked beneath a folder. He extracted it with gloved hands, revealing a cryptic equation scrawled in pencil, its symbols mirroring those found in Thorne's cottage. "This equation," Poirot said, holding it to the light, "it is astronomical, oui, but it is incomplete. A piece of Dr. Thorne's discovery, perhaps, or a copy made by one who coveted it." Japp's eyes widened. "You think she stole it? But why leave it here? A mistake, perhaps?" Poirot mused. "Or a decoy? Dr. Henshaw is a woman of precision, yet this paper, it is carelessly hidden. We must verify her alibi with this Professor Langley." They telephoned the university, and Professor Langley confirmed Henshaw's presence at the lecture until 7:30 p.m., but admitted their discussion afterward was brief, ending by 7:45. The 8 o'clock train, Poirot calculated, gave her just enough time to reach the observatory by 8:30, when Thorne was likely poisoned. The window of opportunity was narrow but possible. Returning to the inn, Poirot sat by the fire, his notebook open, his thoughts a whirl of connections. Dr. Henshaw's ambition was palpable, her rivalry with Thorne a motive as old as time. The cyanide, accessible in the observatory, required no special procurement, and her chemical knowledge made its use plausible. Yet the astrolabe's destruction puzzled him. Its violence suggested passion, not the cold calculation he sensed in Henshaw. Japp, nursing a pint, broke the silence. "What's your take, Poirot? Is Henshaw our woman, or are we barking up the wrong tree?" Poirot closed his notebook, his eyes distant. "She is. A suspect most formidable, Inspector. Her mind, it is sharp, her motive clear. But the heart of this crime, it is not ambition alone. There is something deeper, something personal. Tomorrow, we speak with young Blake. His fear, it may reveal what ambition conceals." As night fell, Poirot stepped onto the inn's balcony, the stars blazing above. The constellation of Cygnus arched across the sky, a reminder of Thorne's quest for celestial truths. "Ambition," Poirot murmured. "It drives the soul to great heights, but also to great depths. And in those depths, Hercule Poirot will find the truth." Chapter 6. The Student's Secret. The late morning light filtered through the lace curtains of the Rose and Crown, casting delicate patterns across the dining room where Hercule Poirot sat, his tisane steaming gently in a porcelain cup. The village of Stargrove lay quiet beyond the windows, its serenity a stark contrast to the turmoil that churned within Poirot's mind. The death of Dr. Elias Thorne, the poisoned glass, the shattered astrolabe, and the Locked Observatory formed a puzzle of exquisite complexity, and Poirot's little gray cells were alight with the challenge of arranging its pieces. Today, his focus turned to Roger Blake, the young student whose nervous glances and trembling hands suggested a secret as heavy as the stars Thorne had studied. Inspector Japp, ever the pragmatist, joined Poirot at the table, his notebook bristling with scribbled notes. "Morning, Poirot," he said, settling heavily into a chair. "I've checked with the university about Henshaw's alibi. Professor Langley confirms she left by 7:45, which gives her a tight window to get to the observatory by 8:30, when Thorne likely died. Possible, but tricky. What's next?" "You seemed keen on that Blake lad." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. "Monsieur Blake, he is a young man of promise, yet his fear, it is palpable. Fear, mon ami, is a window to the soul. He knows something, perhaps of the astrolabe, perhaps of the poison. We shall invite him to speak, and Hercule Poirot, he will listen." They arranged to meet Roger at his lodgings, a modest room above Mrs. Carter's bakery, where the scent of fresh bread mingled with the damp chill of the autumn air. The narrow staircase creaked under Poirot's precise steps, and he paused to adjust his Homburg hat, ensuring its brim sat at the perfect angle. Mrs. Carter, a plump woman with flour-dusted hands, greeted them at the door, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Roger's upstairs," she said. "Poor lad's been jumpy since Dr. Thorne's death. Keeps to himself, reading those star books of his." Poirot thanked her with a courteous nod, noting her observation. "Madame, you have seen Monsieur Blake often, oui? Did he go out the evening of Dr. Thorne's death?" Mrs. Carter frowned, wiping her hands on her apron. "He was in by 8, I reckon. I heard him pacing till late, but he didn't leave again. Mind you, he's been odd lately, sneaking about, looking over his shoulder. I thought he was just studying too hard." Poirot's eyes narrowed, filing the information away as he and Japp ascended to Roger's room. The young man was waiting, perched on the edge of a narrow bed, his sandy hair disheveled, his blue eyes darting nervously. The room was cluttered with books, star charts, and a small telescope propped against the window. A single chair held a pile of papers, and Poirot's sharp gaze caught a glimpse of a familiar hand, Thorne's distinctive script on a folded sheet. "Monsieur Blake," Poirot began, seating himself with care, "you are a student of the stars, a disciple of Dr. Thorne. His death, it has shaken you, non? I wish to understand your movements, your thoughts, on the evening he died." Roger swallowed hard, his hands twisting in his lap. I told you, Mr. Poirot. I was at the observatory that afternoon, working on my thesis. I left around 7. Before Dr. Thorne locked up. I came back here and stayed, and Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. "And yet, Madame Carter says you have been, how you say, jumpy. You were seen near the observatory late at night, not once, but several times in recent weeks. What drew you there, Monsieur Blake? The stars, or something more terrestrial?" Roger's face paled, his fingers clutching the edge of the bed. I was studying, that's all. Dr. Thorne let me use his library. He had books I couldn't find elsewhere. I wasn't doing anything wrong." Poirot's eyes flicked to the pile of papers on the chair. "And these books, these papers, did they include Dr. Thorne's notes on his discovery? A new celestial body, perhaps, that you hope to share in?" Roger's eyes widened, a flush creeping up his neck. "I admired him, Mr. Poirot. He was brilliant. He said his discovery would change astronomy, and I wanted to learn from it, to be part of it. But I didn't steal anything, I swear." Poirot rose, moving to the chair with deliberate grace. He lifted the folded sheet, revealing a star chart annotated in Thorne's hand, its margins filled with coordinates and cryptic symbols. "This, Monsieur Blake, it is Dr. Thorne's work. How came it to be in your possession?" Roger's voice trembled. "He gave it to me. Well, lent it to me. I was helping him with calculations. He trusted me. I was going to return it, but then he died." Jap, standing by the door, raised an eyebrow. "Convenient, that. You're in the observatory, handling his precious notes, and then he's found dead. What else aren't you telling us?" Roger's hands shook, and he buried his face in them. "I saw the astrolabe that night," he blurted. "It was on his desk, intact, when I left at 7. I don't know how it got broken, but I didn't touch it. I swear I didn't." Poirot's gaze softened, sensing truth beneath the boy's panic. "You are frightened, Monsieur Blake." "Of what? The killer, or your own secrets?" Roger looked up, his eyes brimming with tears. I snuck into the observatory a few nights before to borrow his notes. I wanted to impress him, to show I could keep up. He caught me once, but he wasn't angry, just told me to ask next time. I didn't hurt him, Mr. Poirot. He was my mentor." Poirot nodded, returning the star chart to the pile. "Merci, Monsieur Blake. Your candor, it is appreciated, but the heart, it holds more than you say. We will speak again." As they left the bakery, Jap shook his head. "That lad's hiding something, Poirot. He's got Thorne's notes. He's sneaking around at night. Looks guilty as sin." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Guilt, Inspector, is not always the same as murder. Young Blake, he is a follower, not a leader. His secret is one of ambition, perhaps, but not of malice. Yet his presence in the observatory, it narrows our timeline. They walked to the village post office, where Poirot inquired about any correspondence Roger might have sent. Miss Emily Tate, the sharp-eyed postmistress, recalled a letter Roger posted to a friend in Oxford the day after Thorne's death. Its contents unknown, but its haste notable. "He was in a state," she said, fumbling with the stamps, looking like he'd seen a ghost. Poirot thanked her, his mind turning to the star chart. Its annotations suggested a piece of Thorne's discovery, but its presence in Roger's room raised questions. Had he taken it without permission, or had Thorne entrusted it to him? And the astrolabe, Roger's insistence on its intact state at 7 o'clock, aligned with Clara Dunham's account, suggesting the destruction occurred later, near the time of death. Back at the Rose and Crown, Poirot sat by the fire, his notebook open, his pen tracing precise lines. Roger's fear, he wrote, was genuine, but not necessarily of guilt. His access to the observatory, his handling of Thorne's notes, and his nervous demeanor pointed to involvement, yet his youth and admiration for Thorne suggested a lesser role. The cyanide, Poirot noted, required no special acquisition, but its administration demanded precision. Roger's presence at 7 placed him close to the crime, but not within the locked room. Jap, sipping a pint, broke the silence. "What's your take, Poirot?" "Blake's got motive. Maybe he wanted Thorne's discovery for himself, and he's got no solid alibi." After 7, Poirot closed his notebook, his eyes distant. "Motive, oui, but not the heart of a killer. Roger Blake, he seeks to shine in another's light, not to extinguish it. The astrolabe, the poison, the locked room, these are the work of a mind more calculating. Tomorrow we turn to Mademoiselle Dunham. Her calm it conceals, as much as Blake's fear reveals. Outside, the stars emerged over Stargrove, their light cold and eternal. Poirot gazed at them, his thoughts as sharp as the points of light above. "The student's secret," he murmured, "it is but a shadow of the greater truth. And Hercule Poirot, he will bring it to light." Chapter 7. The Curator's Knowledge. The soft glow of midday filtered through the high windows of the Stargrove Observatory's museum wing, where ancient instruments gleamed in polished cases, their brass and wood whispering of centuries past. Hercule Poirot stood amidst this silent assembly, his immaculate gray suit a stark contrast to the antiquated surroundings, his silver-topped cane resting lightly in his gloved hand. The death of Dr. Elias Thorne. Poisoned in a locked room, an astrolabe shattered beside him, had woven a tapestry of intrigue, and Poirot's little gray cells were alight with the challenge of unraveling it. Today, his focus turned to Miss Clara Dunham, the curator whose quiet dignity and intimate knowledge of the observatory's artifacts made her a figure of subtle significance in this celestial drama. Inspector Japp, ever the practical counterpoint to Poirot's precision, joined him in the museum, his boots echoing on the stone floor. "Morning, Poirot," he said, flipping open his notebook. "I've had a word with the Royal Astronomical Society again." "That parcel Thorne sent? Just routine charts, they insist. Nothing about a new discovery. And Blake's letter to Oxford was just a note to a mate. Nothing suspicious. Seems we're hitting dead ends." Poirot's mustache twitched, his green eyes gleaming with quiet amusement. "Dead ends, mon ami? Non, they are but detours. The truth, it lies not in what is sent, but in what is hidden. Miss Dunham, she knows the astrolabe better than any. Her knowledge, it may illuminate the shadows of this crime." They had arranged to meet Clara in the museum, where she felt most at ease, surrounded by the relics she tended with such care. The room was a treasure trove of astronomical history. Sextants, orreries, and star charts lined the walls, each meticulously labeled in Clara's neat hand. She entered quietly, her dark hair pinned neatly, her gray dress adorned with the same crescent moon brooch Poirot had noted before. Her hands, calloused from years of handling heavy artifacts, rested calmly on a leather-bound logbook, but her dark eyes held a flicker of unease as she met Poirot's gaze. "Mademoiselle Dunham," Poirot began, his voice soft yet commanding. "You are the guardian of this observatory's past, oui? The astrolabe, so cruelly destroyed, was under your care. I wish to understand its significance and your connection to Dr. Thorne on the night he met his end." Clara inclined her head, her expression composed but tinged with sorrow. "Dr. Thorne was a friend, Mr. Poirot, as well as a colleague. He valued the observatory's history, though he was sometimes careless with its treasures. The astrolabe was a 17th-century masterpiece, a tool for charting the heavens. I warned him to handle it gently, but he kept it on his desk, as if it were a talisman." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his fingers brushing the edge of his mustache. "A talisman, you say? Did he ever speak of its purpose beyond its beauty? A hidden function, perhaps?" Clara hesitated, her fingers tightening slightly on the logbook. "He was fond of it, said it inspired his work. Once he mentioned it had secrets of its own, but I thought he was being fanciful. It was an instrument, not a puzzle box." Poirot paced slowly, his cane tapping a gentle rhythm. "Yet it was destroyed, mademoiselle, with a violence that suggests intent. You saw it intact at 6 o'clock, you said, and your logbook confirms you left the museum at 7:45. Where did you go after? To my cottage, she replied, her voice steady. It's a short walk from the observatory. I was there all evening, preparing notes for a new exhibit. My neighbor, Mrs. Langley, saw me arrive home. Jap scribbled in his notebook, glancing up. And this logbook, can we see it? Clara handed it over, its pages filled with precise entries detailing her work. The final entry, dated the evening of Thorne's death, noted her departure at 7:45 p.m. Poirot studied it, his sharp eyes noting the careful script, the absence of erasures. A woman of order, he murmured. Yet order, it can conceal as much as it reveals. He turned to a glass case nearby, where a similar astrolabe rested, its brass rings gleaming. Mademoiselle, this instrument, it is like the one destroyed? May I examine it? Clara nodded, unlocking the case with a key from her pocket. Poirot lifted the astrolabe with gloved hands, turning it carefully. Its gears moved smoothly, its engravings precise, but a faint seam along the central disc caught his attention. He pressed gently, but it did not yield. This seam, he said, it suggests a compartment. None? Did Dr. Thorne's astrolabe have such a feature? Clara's brow furrowed. I never noticed one, but it's possible. These instruments sometimes had hidden spaces for storing small tools or notes. I'd need to see the fragments to be sure Poirot returned the astrolabe to its case, his mind racing. The destroyed astrolabe, he suspected, had held Thorne's discovery, perhaps a formula or coordinates concealed in a secret compartment. Its destruction was no act of rage, but a calculated move to retrieve or obscure that secret. Mademoiselle, he said, your knowledge of these artifacts, it is profound. Did Dr. Thorne ever share his discovery with you? Clara's eyes softened, a trace of grief surfacing. He spoke of it in vague terms, a breakthrough that would rewrite the stars, he said, but he was guarded, even with me. I respected his privacy. Poirot's gaze lingered on her hands, strong enough to wield a heavy instrument, yet gentle in their precision. And the cyanide, mademoiselle. Did you know of its presence in the observatory's kitchen? Her eyes widened, but she answered calmly. I knew we had chemicals for cleaning, but I never handled them. My work is with artifacts, not science. I had no reason to touch such things. Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a courteous bow. Merci, Mademoiselle Dunham. You have been most helpful. But the heart, it holds its secrets, and I sense yours are not yet fully revealed. As Clara left, Jap shook his head. She's cool as a cucumber, Poirot, but those hands, she could have smashed that astrolabe, and she's got access to every corner of the place. Motive's the question. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Motive, Inspector, is a matter of the heart. Mademoiselle Dunham, she speaks of Thorne with affection, yet her calm, it is a mask. Let us visit her cottage to see what lies behind it. Clara's cottage, a stone's throw from the observatory, was a quaint dwelling with a garden of late blooming roses. Inside, it was as orderly as her logbook, with shelves of books on astronomy and history, and a small desk bearing a typewriter and neatly stacked papers. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, landing on a framed photograph of Clara and Thorne, taken at an observatory event, their smiles genuine but tinged with something unspoken. Respect, perhaps, or something deeper. A search of the desk revealed a letter, half-written, addressed to a colleague in London. It mentioned the astrolabe's historical value, but made no reference to a hidden compartment. Poirot noted the date, 2 days before Thorne's death, and the careful phrasing, as if Clara were guarding her words even in private. "Interesting," Poirot murmured, replacing the letter. "She is meticulous, yet she writes of the astrolabe as if it holds no secrets. Is this truth or a careful omission?" Japp frowned. "You think she's hiding something? She's got no obvious reason to kill Thorne. She liked the man." By all accounts, Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Liking, mon ami, does not preclude betrayal. Her knowledge, it places her close to the crime, and her strength, it makes the destruction of the astrolabe possible. Yet her motive, it remains elusive." They left the cottage, stopping to speak with Mrs. Langley, the neighbor, who confirmed seeing Clara return home at 7:50 p.m. on the night of the murder. The timeline was tight. Clara could have reached the observatory by 8 o'clock, but the locked door remained a barrier. Poirot's mind turned to the lock, its mechanism simple yet potentially manipulable, a detail he resolved to investigate further. Back at the Rose and Crown, Poirot sat by the fire, his notebook open, his pen moving with deliberate precision. Clara's knowledge of the astrolabe, he wrote, was unmatched, yet she claimed ignorance of its secrets. Her affection for Thorne suggested loyalty, but her access to the observatory and its chemicals made her a viable suspect. The astrolabe's destruction, he noted, required strength, and Clara's calloused hands spoke of capability. Yet her calm demeanor puzzled him, where Dr. Henshaw's ambition burned brightly and Roger's fear flickered like a candle. Clara's restraint was a veil, concealing what lay beneath. Japp, sipping a pint, broke the silence. "What's your take, Poirot? Dunham's got the know-how and the opportunity, but why kill Thorne? She doesn't strike me as the vengeful type." Poirot closed his notebook, his eyes distant. "Vengeance, Inspector, is but one path to murder. Mademoiselle Dunham, she guards her heart, but it speaks in her silences. The astrolabe, the poison, the locked room, these are pieces of a puzzle, and she holds one of them. Tomorrow we return to the observatory to test the lock and its secrets." Outside, the stars gleamed over Stargrove, their light a silent testament to Thorne's quest. Poirot gazed at them, his thoughts as sharp as the celestial points above. "The curator's knowledge," he murmured. "It is a key, but to what lock? Hercule Poirot, he will find the answer." Chapter 8. The Hidden Mechanism. The morning sun pierced the mist shrouding Stargrove, casting a pale glow over the observatory's dome as Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp approached its iron gates. The village, with its thatched cottages and quiet lanes, seemed untouched by the tragedy within, but Poirot's mind was a whirlwind of deduction, each clue a star in the constellation of Dr. Elias Thorne's murder. The poisoned glass, the shattered astrolabe, the locked room. These were not mere incidents, but deliberate strokes in a murderer's design. Today, Poirot resolved to unravel the secret of the astrolabe itself, suspecting it held more than historical value, perhaps the very key to Thorne's lost discovery. Inside the observatory, the air was cool and heavy with the scent of polished brass and old paper. The main chamber, dominated by the great telescope, felt like a shrine to the heavens. Yet it was the desk, where Thorne had met his end, that drew Poirot's attention. The glass of port had been removed for analysis, but the wooden box containing the astrolabe's fragments remained, its contents glinting under the light of a single lamp. Japp, his notebook open, followed Poirot's gaze. "Back to that astrolabe, eh, Poirot?" You're like a dog with a bone. What's it going to tell us today?" Poirot's mustache twitched, his green eyes gleaming with quiet intensity. "Mon ami, the astrolabe is no mere relic. It is a witness, silent but eloquent. Its destruction was not an act of rage, but of purpose. Today, we shall make it speak." He donned a pair of white gloves, his movements precise as he lifted the box onto the desk. The fragments, brass rings, etched dials, and twisted gears lay in disarray, yet Poirot's sharp eyes discerned a pattern. He selected a central disc, thicker than the others, its edge bearing a faint seam he had noted in the museum's intact astrolabe. With delicate fingers, he traced the seam, feeling for a catch or spring. "This disc," he murmured, "it is not merely decorative. It conceals something, a compartment, perhaps, for Dr. Thorne's secrets." Japp leaned closer, his skepticism evident. "A hidden compartment? In that old thing? You think Thorne stashed his discovery inside it?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Précisément, Inspector. A man like Thorne, cautious and solitary, would guard his greatest work with ingenuity. The astrolabe, it was his safe, and the murderer, they knew it." Using a small tool from his pocket, a slender probe of his own design, Poirot pressed along the seam. A faint click sounded, and the disc sprang open, revealing a shallow cavity, now empty. Poirot's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Voila! A compartment as I suspected, but its contents, they are gone. The murderer broke the astrolabe to retrieve them, then staged the destruction to mislead." Japp whistled softly. "Blimey, Poirot. You're right. But what was in it? Papers? A formula?" Poirot nodded, replacing the disc carefully. "Likely a document. Coordinates, perhaps, or an equation for Thorne's discovery. Its absence confirms the motive, not mere envy, but theft of a legacy. The cyanide, the locked room, these were means to an end, but the astrolabe, it was the prize." They turned their attention to the lock on the observatory door, a heavy iron mechanism that had baffled Japp from the start. Poirot knelt, examining it with a magnifying glass, his fingers probing the keyhole. "This lock," he said, "it is sturdy but not inviolable. A thin tool, a wire perhaps, or a curator's implement, could manipulate it from outside, allowing entry without a key." Japp's eyes widened. "You mean the locked room wasn't locked at all? Someone could have slipped in, poisoned the port, and smashed the astrolabe?" Poirot rose, dusting his gloves. "Not slipped in, Inspector, but entered with purpose. The key in Thorne's pocket was a deception, placed there to create the illusion of a sealed room. The murderer, they are clever, but not cleverer than Hercule Poirot." Leaving the observatory, they walked to the village hall, where Poirot had requested the suspect's presence for a brief meeting. He wished to observe their reactions to the astrolabe's secret, hoping a glance or gesture would betray the guilty. Dr. Margaret Henshaw arrived first, her posture rigid, her gray eyes wary. Roger Blake followed, his youthful face pale, his hands fidgeting. Clara Dunham entered last, her calm demeanor intact, her dark eyes fixed on the box of fragments with a flicker of recognition. "Mes amis," Poirot began, standing before the table. "The astrolabe, it has revealed its secret, a hidden compartment, now empty. Dr. Thorne concealed his discovery within it, and the murderer, they broke it to claim that prize. I ask you now, what do you know of this compartment?" Henshaw's lips thinned, her voice sharp. "I knew nothing of it, Mr. Poirot. Elias was secretive, but I thought the astrolabe was just a trinket. If it held his discovery, He never told me Roger's eyes darted to the box, his voice trembling. I saw him fiddle with it, but I didn't know it opened. He said it was special, that's all. Clara's hands tightened on her logbook, her expression composed but strained. As curator, I studied the astrolabe's craftsmanship, but I never suspected a compartment. If Elias hid something in it, he kept it from me. Poirot's gaze swept over them, noting Henshaw's defiance, Roger's nervousness, Clara's restraint. "One of you," he said softly, "knew of this compartment. One of you entered the locked room, poisoned Dr. Thorne, and took his secret. The truth, it will not remain hidden." Henshaw's eyes flashed. "This is preposterous. I was at my lecture, as I've told you." Roger stammered. "I left before he locked up. I didn't do anything." Clara's voice was steady. "I was in my cottage, Mr. Poirot. I had no reason to harm Elias Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. Enough. The little gray cells, they work, and they see what you do not say. For now, you may go." As the suspects departed, Japp turned to Poirot, his frustration evident. "They're all sticking to their stories, Poirot. But that compartment, it's a game changer." Whoever knew about it had to be close to Thorne. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Close, oui, but not necessarily trusted. The murderer, they are cunning, using the astrolabe's destruction to mask their theft. We must verify their alibis further, Inspector, and examine the lock's vulnerability. They returned to the observatory, where Poirot tested the lock with a thin wire, confirming it could be manipulated from outside with skill. The discovery narrowed the field. Henshaw's expertise, Roger's access, and Clara's knowledge of the observatory's tools all made them capable. But motive remained the key, and Poirot sensed it lay in Thorne's discovery, now lost to the flames of ambition. Back at the Rose and Crown, Poirot sat by the fire, his notebook open, his pen tracing precise lines. The astrolabe's compartment, he wrote, was the heart of the crime, its contents, the motive. Henshaw's ambition, Roger's eagerness, Clara's devotion, each could have driven them to act, but the lock's manipulation suggested a calculated mind. The cyanide, accessible to all, required no special procurement, but its delivery demanded precision, likely within minutes of Thorne's death at 8 p.m. Japp, nursing a pint, broke the silence. "We're getting closer, Poirot, but that locked room still nags at me. If the lock could be picked, any of them could have done it." Poirot closed his notebook, his eyes distant. "The lock, Inspector, is but a detail. The true lock is the human heart, and it is there we will find our killer. Tomorrow, we reconstruct the night of the crime, and the stars, they will guide us." Outside, the night sky over Stargrove blazed with constellations, their light indifferent to the tragedy below. Poirot gazed at them, his thoughts as sharp as the celestial points. "The hidden mechanism," he murmured. "It is not only in the astrolabe, but in the soul of the murderer. And Hercule Poirot, he will uncover it." Chapter 9. The Night of the Crime. The dawn broke over Stargrove with a clarity that belied the shadows of its recent tragedy, the observatory's dome catching the first rays like a silent sentinel. Hercule Poirot, his gray suit impeccable despite the early hour, stood outside the Rose and Crown, his silver-topped cane glinting as he surveyed the village. The death of Dr. Elias Thorne, poisoned by cyanide, an astrolabe shattered, a room locked from within, had woven a web of deception, and Poirot's little gray cells were poised to cut through its strands. Today, he would reconstruct the fatal evening, piecing together the movements of the suspects and the mechanics of the crime, with the astrolabe's hidden compartment as the linchpin of his inquiry. Inspector Japp joined him, his overcoat slightly rumpled, his notebook bristling with annotations. "Morning, Poirot," he said, stifling a yawn. "I've got the final coroner's report. Cyanide, as you thought, took effect within minutes. Thorne died around 8 p.m., give or take. The assistant found him at 7 a.m., door still locked. I've also checked with the station master. Henshaw's train arrived at 9 p.m., so her window's tight. What's your plan?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. "Mon ami, the night of the crime is a puzzle, and we shall arrange its pieces with precision. The lock, the poison, the astrolabe, these are not separate acts, but a symphony of intent. We return to the observatory to test the lock and trace the footsteps of the murderer." The observatory stood silent, its interior cool and shadowed, the great telescope a mute witness to the events of that fateful night. Poirot approached the heavy oak door, its iron lock gleaming dully. He produced a thin wire from his pocket, a tool crafted for such delicate work, and knelt to examine the mechanism. With careful movements, he inserted the wire, probing the tumblers within. A soft click rewarded his efforts, and the lock yielded, the door swinging inward without need of a key. "Voila," Poirot said, rising with a flourish. "The locked room, it is no fortress. A skilled hand with a simple tool could open it from outside, place the key in Thorne's pocket, and depart, leaving the illusion of a sealed chamber." Japp's eyes widened. "Blimey, Poirot. You're saying the killer didn't need to be inside? They could have slipped in, poisoned the port, smashed the astrolabe, and locked up after." Poirot nodded, his expression serene. "Précisément, Inspector. The lock, it is vulnerable, and our suspects, they are not without skill. Dr. Henshaw, with her precision, young Blake, with his eagerness, Mademoiselle Dunham, with her curator's tools. All could have managed it, but the timing, it is critical. Let us reconstruct the evening." They moved to the desk, where the box of astrolabe fragments remained, its broken gears a testament to the violence of the crime. Poirot reviewed the timeline, his voice measured. Dr. Thorne locked the observatory at 8 p.m., as was his habit. The cyanide, swift in its action, suggests he drank the poisoned port shortly before. Roger Blake was here until 7 p.m. and saw the astrolabe intact. Clara Dunham left the museum wing at 7:45 p.m., her logbook precise. Dr. Henshaw's lecture ended at 7:30 p.m., and she claims to have caught the 8 p.m. train, arriving in Stargrove at 9 p.m. The murder, it occurred between 7:45 and 8:30 p.m., a narrow window. Japp rubbed his chin. That puts Blake closest, but he swears he left before the lock. Dunham's nearby, but her neighbor saw her home by 7:50. Henshaw's the trickiest. Her train schedule checks out, but she could have made it to the observatory by 8:30. If she hurried, Poirot's eyes narrowed. The train, it is a detail we must verify. But first, let us consider the poison. The cyanide found in the kitchen was accessible to all. The glass bore only Thorne's fingerprints, suggesting the poison was added without touching it. A syringe, perhaps, or a careful pour. They examined the kitchen, where the vial of cyanide still sat behind a tin of cleaning powder. Poirot noted its position, easily overlooked yet within reach of anyone familiar with the observatory's stores. "The murderer," he said, knew this place well. They moved with confidence, leaving no trace but the poison's work. Returning to the village, Poirot and Japp visited the station master, a wiry man named Mr. Gibbs, who confirmed the 8 p.m. train's arrival and Henshaw's presence on it. She was in a rush, he said, carrying a small bag, looking a bit frazzled. Got off at 9 p.m., went straight to the Rose and Crown. Poirot filed the information away, his mind turning to the astrolabe. Its hidden compartment, now empty, suggested the killer had retrieved Thorne's discovery, a formula, coordinates, or notes that promised fame. The violent destruction, he reasoned, was a ruse to mask the theft, making it appear as vandalism or rage. The astrolabe, he murmured, it was the heart of the crime, but the lock, it is the key. Back at the Rose and Crown, Poirot arranged to meet the suspects individually, seeking to test their reactions to the lock's vulnerability. Dr. Henshaw arrived first, her posture rigid, her gray eyes wary. "Mr. Poirot," she said, "this talk of locks and compartments is nonsense. I was on a train when Elias died. You've checked my alibi." Poirot's smile was courteous but piercing. "Indeed, madame, but the lock, it can be opened from outside with a simple tool. Your knowledge of the observatory, your skill, could you not have used such a method?" Her cheeks flushed, but her voice remained steady. "I'm an astronomer, not a locksmith. I had no reason to harm Elias, and I was nowhere near the observatory. Roger Blake was next, his youthful face pale, his hands trembling. "I didn't know about the lock," he stammered. "I left at 7 o'clock, I swear. The astrolabe was fine when I saw it. I didn't touch anything." Poirot's gaze softened, sensing fear rather than guilt. "And yet, Monsieur Blake, you were close to Dr. Thorne, close to his secrets. The astrolabe's compartment, did he ever hint at its purpose?" Roger shook his head, his eyes darting. "No, he just said it was special. I thought he meant its history, not a hiding place." Clara Dunham entered last, her calm demeanor intact, her dark eyes meeting Poirot's with quiet resolve. "Mademoiselle," he said, "you know the observatory's every corner. The lock, it is not so secure as it seems. A curator's tool, perhaps, could open it?" Clara's hands tightened on her logbook, but her voice was steady. "I have tools for handling artifacts, Mr. Poirot, but I've never used them on a lock. I was in my cottage by 7:50, as my neighbor confirmed. I had no part in this." Poirot dismissed them, his mind cataloging their responses. Henshaw's defiance, Roger's fear, Clara's restraint, each held a piece of the truth, but the whole remained elusive. He turned to Japp, who was pacing the room. "We're close, Poirot," Japp said, "but that lock trick, it opens the field wide. Any of them could have done it." Poirot's smile was serene. "The field inspector is not so wide. The murderer, they knew the astrolabe's secret, the lock's weakness, and the cyanide's location. This is a crime of knowledge, not chance. We must confirm the alibis further and seek the parcel's true contents." That evening, Poirot sat by the inn's fire, his notebook open, his pen tracing precise lines. The timeline, he wrote, was tight. Thorne locked the observatory at 8 p.m., drank the poisoned port shortly before, and died by 8:30. Roger's departure at 7 o'clock left a gap, Clara's at 7:45 a possibility, and Henshaw's arrival at 9 o'clock a challenge, but not impossible. The lock's vulnerability shifted the focus from access to intent, and the astrolabe's empty compartment pointed to theft as the motive. Japp, sipping a pint, broke the silence. What's next, Poirot? We've got the how, but the who's still a mystery. Poirot closed his notebook, his eyes distant. The who, Inspector, lies in the why. The astrolabe's secret. It was the prize, and the poison. It was the price. Tomorrow, we gather them all, and Hercule Poirot, he will reveal the truth. Outside, the stars blazed over Stargrove, their light a silent testament to Thorne's lost legacy. Poirot gazed at them, his thoughts as sharp as the celestial points. The night of the crime, he murmured, it is a mirror, reflecting the heart of the murderer. And that heart, it will not escape me. Chapter 10. The Motive Revealed. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the Stargrove Observatory, its dome a silent witness to the drama about to unfold within. Hercule Poirot, his gray suit pristine and his mustache waxed to perfection, stood at the center of the main chamber, the great telescope looming behind him like a guardian of celestial secrets. The air was thick with anticipation, the scent of polished brass and old paper mingling with the faint chill of autumn. The death of Dr. Elias Thorne, poisoned by cyanide, an antique astrolabe shattered beside him in a locked room, had woven a tapestry of deception, and Poirot's little gray cells had worked tirelessly to unravel its threads. Today he would confront the suspects, lay bare the truth, and name the murderer. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his notebook tucked away, his ruddy face a mix of skepticism and trust in Poirot's methods. "This is it then, Poirot," he said, his voice low. "You're sure you've got it figured out? That lock trick and the astrolabe's compartment, they've got me stumped, but you seem certain." Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his smile serene yet resolute. "Mon ami, the puzzle is complete. The poison, the astrolabe, the lock, they are but pieces of a whole, and the whole, it points to one heart consumed by ambition. Let us gather our players, and the curtain, it shall rise." The suspects were summoned to the observatory, their footsteps echoing on the stone floor as they entered. Dr. Margaret Henshaw arrived first, her auburn hair pulled tightly back, her gray eyes wary but defiant, her navy coat buttoned against the chill. Roger Blake followed, his youthful face pale, his hands fidgeting as he glanced nervously at the wooden box containing the astrolabe's fragments. Clara Dunham entered last, her dark hair neatly pinned, her gray dress adorned with the crescent moon brooch, her calm demeanor masking a quiet tension. They sat at a long table, the box of fragments at its center, a silent accusation. Poirot stood before them, his small frame commanding the room, his cane resting lightly in his hand. "Mes amis," he began, his voice soft but piercing, "we are here to resolve a tragedy, the murder of Dr. Elias Thorne, a man whose pursuit of the stars ended in betrayal. The facts, they are clear. A glass of port, poisoned with cyanide, an astrolabe, shattered with purpose, a room, locked from within. But these are not mysteries in isolation. They are the work of a single mind, and that mind is among us." Henshaw's lips thinned, her voice sharp. "This is theatrical nonsense, Mr. Poirot. I've told you my whereabouts. I was on a train when Elias died." Roger's voice trembled. "I left the observatory at 7. I didn't do anything, I swear." Clara's dark eyes met Poirot's, steady but guarded. "I was in my cottage, as my neighbor confirmed. I had no reason to harm." Elias Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. "Patience, mes amis. Let us walk through the night of the crime, and the truth, it shall emerge. Dr. Thorne locked this observatory at 8 p.m., as was his habit. Within minutes, he drank from a glass of port, laced with cyanide, and died swiftly. The astrolabe, intact at 7 p.m., when Monsieur Blake departed, was found shattered. The key, in Thorne's pocket, suggested a locked room. But the lock? He paused, his eyes gleaming. It is not so secure as it seems. He moved to the door, producing a thin wire. With a deft movement, he manipulated the lock, eliciting a soft click as it opened. A simple tool, a curator's implement or a scientist's probe, could open this lock from outside, allowing the murderer to enter, poison the port, and place the key to create the illusion of a sealed room. Japp nodded, impressed despite himself. "Go on, Poirot. What about the astrolabe?" Poirot approached the box, lifting the central disc with gloved hands. This astrolabe, it held a secret, a hidden compartment, now empty. Dr. Thorne, cautious and brilliant, concealed his discovery within it, a formula, perhaps, or coordinates for a new celestial body. The murderer knew this, broke the astrolabe to retrieve it, and staged the destruction to suggest vandalism or rage. He turned to the suspects, his gaze sweeping over them. Each of you had access to this observatory. Each had reason to covet Thorne's discovery. But only one had the knowledge, the opportunity, and the ambition to kill. Henshaw's eyes flashed. "This is absurd. I was at my lecture until 7:30, then on the train. I couldn't have reached the observatory in time?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Could you not, Dr. Henshaw? Your lecture ended at 7:30, and you claim to have caught the 8 p.m. train, arriving in Stargrove at 9. Yet the station master noted your haste, your frazzled state. A car, perhaps, or a bicycle from a colleague, could have brought you here by 8 o'clock, a mere 20-minute journey. You knew the observatory, its chemicals, its lock. You knew the astrolabe's secret, for you and Thorne had studied such instruments together." Henshaw's face paled, her hands clenching. "You have no proof, Mr. Poirot." "I respected Elias, despite our differences." Poirot's voice softened, but his eyes were relentless. "Differences, madame?" "No, it was jealousy. Thorne's discovery, a new star, a legacy to eclipse your own, threatened your place in the firmament. You argued with him as Madame Pritchard overheard, accusing him of stealing your ideas. You saw your chance slipping away, and so you acted. You slipped cyanide from the kitchen into his port during a brief visit, perhaps under the guise of reconciliation. You returned after your lecture, using a tool to open the lock, retrieved the notes from the astrolabe's compartment, and smashed it to conceal your theft." Roger gasped, his eyes wide. "Dr. Henshaw? But she's a scientist." Clara's hands tightened on her logbook, her voice low. Elias trusted her. How could she? Henshaw's composure cracked, her voice rising. "This is speculation. I was on that train. You can't prove I was here." Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "The proof, madame, is in your heart. The equation in your lodgings, a fragment of Thorne's work, was no coincidence. You took his notes, burned them to hide your theft, but your ambition, it betrayed you. The lock's vulnerability, the cyanide's accessibility, the astrolabe's secret, these were known to you, a woman of science, driven by a desire to shine alone." Henshaw's shoulders slumped, her defiance crumbling. "He was going to take everything," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I worked as hard as he did, but he would have claimed it all. I deserved that discovery." Japp stepped forward, his handcuffs ready. "That's enough, Dr. Henshaw. You're under arrest for the murder of Dr. Elias Thorne." As Japp led her away, Poirot turned to Roger and Clara, his expression softening. The stars, they endure, but human ambition, it is fleeting. Go now, and honor Dr. Thorne's memory with your own light. The observatory fell silent, the telescope pointing to the heavens, a reminder of Thorne's unfulfilled quest. Poirot gazed at it, his thoughts as clear as the sky above. "The motive," he murmured, "it is always the heart, and the heart, it never lies to Hercule Poirot." Chapter 11. The Confession. The fading light of the autumn afternoon bathed the Stargrove Observatory in a somber glow, its dome a silent monument to the tragedy that had unfolded within. Inside, the air was heavy with the weight of revelation, the great telescope standing as a mute witness to the drama now reaching its climax. Hercule Poirot, his gray suit immaculate and his mustache perfectly symmetrical, stood at the center of the main chamber, his green eyes fixed on Dr. Margaret Henshaw. The suspects, Henshaw, Roger Blake, and Clara Dunham, remained seated at the long table, the box of shattered astrolabe fragments a stark reminder of the crime. Inspector Japp, his handcuffs at the ready, stood by the door, his ruddy face a mix of awe and impatience as Poirot prepared to draw the final curtain on the mystery of Dr. Elias Thorne's murder. Poirot's voice, soft yet commanding, filled the room. "Mes amis, we have reached the heart of this tragedy. Dr. Thorne, a man of the stars, was poisoned by cyanide, his astrolabe destroyed, his room locked. But the lock, it was no barrier, and the astrolabe, it held a secret, a compartment containing his discovery, stolen by his killer. That killer, Dr. Henshaw, stands before us, her ambition the spark that ignited this crime." Henshaw's face, pale and strained, contorted with a flicker of defiance. Her hands clenched the edge of the table, her gray eyes blazing. "You have no proof, Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice sharp but trembling. "Your theories are clever, but they are speculation. I was on a train when Elias died. You cannot place me here." Poirot's smile was serene, his gaze unrelenting. "Non, madame, the truth is not so easily dismissed. Let us walk through the night of the crime, step by step, and your heart, it will confess what your words deny." He paced slowly, his cane tapping a deliberate rhythm on the stone floor. Dr. Thorne locked this observatory at 8 p.m., as was his custom. He drank from a glass of port, laced with cyanide, and died within minutes. The astrolabe, intact at 7 p.m., when Monsieur Blake departed, was found shattered. The key in Thorne's pocket suggested a locked room, but the lock... He paused, producing a thin wire from his pocket. It could be opened from outside with a tool, a skill you, Dr. Henshaw, with your precision and knowledge, possessed. Henshaw's lips parted, but no words came. Roger Blake, his youthful face pale, stared at her in disbelief, while Clara Dunham's hands tightened on her logbook, her dark eyes wide with shock. Poirot continued, his voice a blend of compassion and steel. "You, Dr. Henshaw, were driven by jealousy. Thorne's discovery, a new celestial body, a legacy to eclipse all others, threatened your own standing. You argued with him, as Madame Pritchard overheard at the Rose and Crown, accusing him of stealing your ideas. You knew of the astrolabe's hidden compartment, for you had studied such instruments with him in your early collaborations. You saw your chance slipping away, and so you acted." He turned to the box of fragments, lifting the central disc with gloved hands. This compartment held Thorne's notes, coordinates perhaps, or a formula. You visited him that evening, under the guise of mending your rift. You slipped cyanide from the kitchen into his port, a poison you knew well from your laboratory work. You left, but returned after your lecture, using a tool, perhaps a curator's probe from the museum, to open the lock. You retrieved the notes, smashed the astrolabe to mask your theft, and placed the key in Thorne's pocket to create the illusion of a locked room. Henshaw's composure shattered, her hands trembling as she rose from her chair. "You can't prove this," she cried, her voice breaking. "I was on the 8 p.m. train. The station master saw me." Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "The station master saw you arrive at 9 p.m., frazzled and hurried, but the lecture ended at 7:30, and a car, borrowed perhaps from a colleague, could have brought you to Stargrove by 8 o'clock. The equation in your lodgings, a fragment of Thorne's work, was no accident. You took his notes, and in your haste to claim his discovery, you burned them, believing no one would trace them to you." Henshaw's shoulders slumped, her defiance crumbling like the astrolabe's gears. She sank back into her chair, her voice a whisper. "He was going to take everything," she said, tears glinting in her eyes. "I worked as hard as he did, years of calculations, observations, sleepless nights. But Elias, he was the golden one, the one they all praised. He hinted at his discovery, said it would change astronomy, but he wouldn't share it. I deserved it as much as he did." Roger gasped, his voice choked. "You killed him? For a discovery?" Clara's eyes filled with tears, her voice low. "Elias trusted you, Margaret. How could you?" Henshaw's gaze dropped to the table, her hands covering her face. "I didn't mean to kill him at first. I went to talk, to demand my share, but he laughed, said I'd never match him. I saw the port, the cyanide in the kitchen. It was so easy. I slipped it in when he turned away. I left, but I couldn't stop thinking about the astrolabe. I knew it held his notes. I came back after my lecture, used a probe from the museum to open the lock. I took the notes and broke the astrolabe to make it look like a fit of rage. I burned the notes later. I couldn't bear to see his name on them." Japp stepped forward, his handcuffs clicking. "That's enough, Dr. Henshaw. You're under arrest for the murder of Dr. Elias Thorne." As Japp led her away, her head bowed, Poirot turned to Roger and Clara, his expression one of quiet sorrow. "The heart, it is a fragile thing, mes amis. Ambition, it can shine like a star, but it can also burn. Go now, and let Dr. Thorne's light guide you forward." The observatory fell silent, the telescope pointing to the heavens, a reminder of Thorne's unfulfilled dreams. Poirot approached the desk, his fingers brushing the edge where the glass of port had stood. "The confession," he murmured. "It is the truth laid bare, but it is also a wound. The stars, they endure, but men, they falter. Outside, the sun dipped below the hills, casting Stargrove in twilight." Poirot walked to the village green, his cane tapping softly, his thoughts turning to the resolution of the case. Japp joined him, his expression a mix of relief and wonder. "How do you do it, Poirot?" he asked. "You see things the rest of us miss. The lock, the astrolabe, her motive." It's uncanny. Poirot's smile was modest, his eyes distant. "The little gray cells, mon ami, they see what the heart hides." Dr. Henshaw's ambition was her undoing, but it was her words, her silences, that betrayed her. The truth, it is always there, waiting for one who listens. As they reached the Rose and Crown, Poirot paused, gazing at the stars emerging above. The motive, it is revealed, but the loss, it remains. Dr. Thorne's discovery, it is gone, but his quest, It lives in those who follow. He turned to Jap, his voice soft. Let us drink a tisane, Inspector, and toast to the stars, for they, at least, are constant. Chapter 12. The Stars Above. The twilight draped Stargrove in a velvet cloak, the village's thatched cottages and winding lanes softened by the gentle glow of lanterns. Above, the stars emerged one by one, their cold, eternal light a stark contrast to the human tragedy that had unfolded below. Hercule Poirot stood on the steps of the Rose and Crown, his gray overcoat buttoned against the autumn chill, his silver-topped cane resting lightly in his gloved hand. The case of Dr. Elias Thorne's murder, solved through the relentless work of his little gray cells, had left a lingering melancholy, a reminder of the fragility of human ambition and the enduring quest for truth. Dr. Margaret Henshaw's confession, her jealousy-driven act of poisoning Thorne and shattering the astrolabe to steal his discovery, had closed the investigation. But the stars, Poirot mused, held secrets that no crime could dim. Inspector Jap joined him, his overcoat slightly askew, his ruddy face softened by the satisfaction of a case resolved. "Well, Poirot," he said, clapping his hands against the cold. "You've done it again. Henshaw's locked up, her confessions airtight, and the village can sleep easier. I'll never understand how you piece it all together. The lock, the astrolabe, her motive. It's like you see into people's souls." Poirot's mustache twitched, his green eyes gleaming with a modest smile. "Mon ami, the soul. It speaks in gestures, in silences, in the flicker of an eye. Dr. Henshaw's ambition was a flame that consumed her. But the clues, the cyanide, the manipulated lock, the astrolabe's hidden compartment, they were the map to her heart. Hercule Poirot, he merely follows the map." They walked toward the village green, where the observatory's dome loomed against the darkening sky, a silent monument to Thorne's dreams. Poirot's thoughts turned to the astronomer, a man whose pursuit of a new celestial body had ended in betrayal. The notes, burned by Henshaw, were lost forever, their secrets reduced to ash. Yet the observatory, with its telescope and relics, remained a beacon for those who would follow. "Jap," Poirot said, pausing by the green. "This case, it is not only about murder. It is about legacy. Dr. Thorne sought to touch the stars, and though his discovery is gone, his spirit, it must endure. I shall write to Mademoiselle Dunham to suggest a fitting tribute." Jap raised an eyebrow. "A tribute? What have you got in mind?" Poirot's smile was serene. "A new astrolabe, Inspector, crafted in Thorne's honor, to inspire those who gaze upward. The stars, they are eternal, and we must not let human folly dim their light." At the Rose and Crown, Poirot retired to his room, its modest comforts a stark contrast to the grandeur of his London flat. He sat at a small writing desk, the fire crackling softly, and took up his pen. His letter to Clara Dunham was brief but heartfelt, written in his precise, elegant hand. "Chère Mademoiselle Dunham, the tragedy of Dr. Thorne's death has left a shadow on Stargrove, but his quest for the stars must not fade. I propose that the observatory commission a new astrolabe, a tribute to his brilliance, to stand as a symbol of the pursuit of truth. You, with your knowledge and care, are best suited to guide this endeavor. Let it be a light for future seekers, unbroken by the frailties of the heart. Yours, with respect, Hercule Poirot." He sealed the letter, his thoughts drifting to Roger Blake, whose youthful eagerness would carry Thorne's legacy forward, and to Clara, whose quiet strength would preserve it. The case had tested his intellect, but it had also touched his heart, a reminder that even the brightest minds could fall to the darkest impulses. The next morning, Poirot prepared to depart Stargrove, his suitcase packed with meticulous care. He stood at the station, the train to London puffing steam into the crisp air. Japp, seeing him off, shook his hand warmly. "You're a marvel, Poirot," he said. "Scotland Yard could use you full-time, you know." Poirot chuckled, adjusting his Homburg hat. "Non, mon ami. The little gray cells, they thrive on the occasional puzzle, not the daily grind. But should you need me, you know where to find Hercule Poirot." As the train pulled away, Poirot gazed out the window. The hills of Stargrove receding into the mist. The stars, though hidden by daylight, lingered in his mind, their light a metaphor for the truths he sought. "The stars above," he murmured, "they see all, but they judge not." It is for man to seek justice, and for Poirot to find it. In London, he returned to his flat, its order and symmetry a balm to his soul. He placed the case file of the broken astrolabe in his cabinet, alongside others that had challenged his intellect. But as he sipped a tisane by the fire, his thoughts returned to Stargrove, to the observatory, and to the man whose dreams had reached for the heavens. "Dr. Thorne," he said softly, "your light, it shines still, in those who seek the truth unbroken."